You are listening to Realign Your Life Podcast, where I discuss with you strategies on how to realign your life and move towards the direction you always want to. I am Vivian, the host of this podcast, and every week I will bring value on how to improve and realign your life either through a guest or my thoughts. I can't wait to share what we have this week. It's time to realign your life. Well, hello there, and welcome back to Realign Your Life Podcast. This is Vivian, the host of this show, and I am so honored to have you to join me for this episode. Well, you know, I really do love to express my opinion on a lot of issues that are out there. But, you know, we are all in the process of this journey of realignment. And, you know, everybody has a different experience. However, we can all learn from each other's experiences. So today, I have a special treat for you. And it's so interesting because this is a person that I work with directly, and it is Emily Kemmann. Emily, welcome to Realign Your Life Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on.
Well, we're excited to hear what you have to share with us about your journey on the realignment. So Emily and I actually met about 2 years ago. And we met because she runs a nonprofit called Alongside Families, and she was looking for a church engagement coordinator. And voila, I appeared. And so I have been with this ministry for the last 2 years and have just found it to be a joy. However, like most things in life, it just didn't happen. And it was a journey for Emily. So in meeting Emily, she is a social worker by education. And the one thing I liked about it is that she actually grew up in Texas. And y'all know how I feel about Texas. There's one thing that I really do love about Texas, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, you haters out there, just stop it. Just stop it. Stop it. But Emily hails from, grew up in the Texas on the border of Mexico. And she's going to share a little bit more about that herself. I want her to share that because that's part of her journey. So she is local here in Mint Hill and has a wonderful husband whose phone I have almost on speed dial, Lars, and he is really, really great with technology. And they have a sweet, sweet little addition, a 1-year-old Remy that has been added to this family. So Emily, share with us a little bit more about your background and how you ended up on this wonderful journey of Alongside Families.
Well, I think for that, I would need to go back. You know, you referenced my growing up on the border of Mexico, and I grew up with parents who just really loved Jesus and loved people. So my parents were missionaries on the border of Mexico and in rural Mexico. They would go into little rural subsistence farming towns about 8 hours south of the border of Mexico to share the gospel and to support families as able. My dad is a nurse, and so he was able to support families medically as well. And I think from that experience growing up and really being in a family who my parents wanted us to be on mission together as a family, that it wasn't their ministry, it was our family really seeking to share the gospel and to love others, that there was really birthed in me a deep love of people, and also I think a love of being there for people during difficult times. We in the areas we would go, there wasn't much support for families. There was a lot of poverty, and we would witness a lot of things going on with substance abuse and domestic violence and alcoholism, marriages of very young women at 13, 14 years old. And there was just birthed in me a real love for people. And that's where I believe that started.
Wow.
Fast forward to here in Charlotte, North Carolina, I did get my Master of Social Work degree, and the Lord kept opening doors through various positions I held that seemed fairly unrelated, but I believe now, looking back, really were a preparing ground for the path the Lord was laying for me.
That's interesting, the way that the Lord works like that. We do one thing and we think, okay, well, this is going to be my career for life. And then all of a sudden there's this big hiccup. And, I'm reminded so much of so many of the characters in the Bible that start out one way, and you wonder, okay, God, why you do all of that? But all of the experiences that we have in our life can lead us to our life's work. And like you're saying, how in the world is all of this going to come together? So what inspired you so you talked a little bit about what inspired you to really go into social work, and how does that passion really translate into your vision for alongside family? And you might want to give us a little bit of background on how alongside family came into being.
Okay. So my background in social work, I've served in various areas, working in the court system with children who had been removed from their parents due to abuse or neglect. I've also co-facilitated substance abuse treatment groups for women. I had worked with families who were living below the poverty line and were getting services for their child through the Head Start program. And I also have worked with young people, 10 to 12-year-old girls, adolescents who had severe behaviors due to severe abuse and neglect that they experienced and needed to be in a residential treatment program. So all of that coming together, something that really became a burden on my heart was that I was serving children and families so far down the road when they were at a point that intervention was very challenging, because there was so much trauma and so much brokenness and families fractured. And I really became burdened of saying, is this really what it's all about? Waiting to try to bring healing and patch things up after a family has experienced all of this trauma? Or is there a way that we can intervene earlier than that? And so that was a burden on my heart as a social worker. But, first and foremost, I am a Christ follower. And as a Christian, it was a deeper burden on my heart of feeling that, why was it that the local church wasn't doing more to step in and intervene and serve families before it did reach that point, that families needed to be broken apart by entering the foster care system, or before a lot of trauma had occurred. And so that really started me down the road of looking into options and beginning to learn about something I hadn't known much about before, which is the term family preservation, of saying, can we keep a family of origin together by providing supportive services? And that led to, way back in 2015, me really praying through this opportunity I had to launch a local chapter of a nationwide organization that does family preservation work, of providing crisis child hostings, so that when a family is going through a crisis, like a single parent needing to be hospitalized, that there's an option for a child being hosted by volunteers rather than having to be removed from the parent into the foster care system. So that was my initial step into this, of really taking a leap of faith in 2016 with my husband. We were brand new, newlyweds, married. and really took a step of faith to say, let's initially launch a local chapter of this nationwide organization and try to start family preservation work here in Charlotte.
So tell us a little bit more, or tell those listening out there a little bit more about what family preservation is, because this is a fairly new term and a fairly new ministry within the culture.
Sure. So family preservation really is about saying, can we wrap around a family of origin? So whoever is the family of origin caring for this child, whether it's the mother or father or a grandparent who's having to raise a child, but can we keep that family of origin intact versus the alternative, which in the United States, we have the foster care system, which was built for if a child has been abused or neglected. And so that's really what the foster care system is intended, that the child welfare system needs to intervene and remove a child from a parent if there has been abuse or neglect. When unfortunately, it's a lot of children in the foster care system in America who are there not because they were abused or neglected, but simply because their parent doesn't have a support system when they're going through a family crisis. And so, unfortunately, many children that end up in the foster care system are there unnecessarily. It's simply because there's not an alternative. And so what Alongside Families seeks to do, and what family preservation is all about, is simply saying, can we provide a voluntary, dignifying alternative to a child having to enter foster care, and instead provide a way that a parent can voluntarily ask for help when they're walking through a crisis, have their child hosted with a volunteer host family in a partner church. We work solely through local partner churches. And the parent can maintain full custody of their child, just like if that child was staying with a grandma or an aunt, and request the child return home to them as soon as the crisis is over. And it's what could have become sort of a minefield in this family's life to destroy the family, instead just becomes a bump in the road because they have a support system wrapping around them.
And that is such a beautiful thing. And that is one of the things I love so much about this ministry, is because we're giving people an opportunity. And it sounds like to me that you have such a heart for the marginalized and those that are often overlooked in our society, even though most parents are parents, that they really do want to be able to provide for their family and for their children, and to remain a unit. And I've seen that work. But I would ask you also, how do you manage the emotional demands of working in family preservation? And as we talked earlier, in being able to maintain a personal and a professional balance. How do you handle that balance? Because I know in social work and medicine and in a lot of fields that we work with people, we end up bringing a lot of that home.
Yes. This is something that the Lord is continually working on in me, and I am grateful that He did give me opportunities through other positions I had, other ministries I was a part of before I launched this ministry, to start practicing that, because I was already in a position where I was practicing some things that helped with that emotional toll. And there's a couple of those I could share that have been practical for me. One has always been having some sort of rituals that are sort of a physical thing that help remind me that I'm unplugged or disconnected from this now. When I used to co-facilitate a women's trauma substance abuse treatment group, after I drove home, I would sit in the driveway for maybe 3 to 5 minutes and do some breathing exercises. And then I would just unbuckle my seatbelt. And that click to me was a click of, okay, now we're clicking, we're releasing this, and we're going inside. And it was just a physical reminder that when I heard that click, it was, okay, time to turn that part off. That was something I did back then. Now, I have, similar rituals I do, but I would say two of the most important things that I use probably on a daily basis almost is what I call two types of prayers that I use. One is a prayer of release, and then one is a prayer of listening or receiving. And the prayer of release is really, I have found, especially when I've been walking alongside someone who has been experiencing a lot of trauma or injustice, I have a very strong sense of justice and what's right and wanting to be a defender and a healer. And so I really do have a tendency to take that into myself and onto myself. And so a prayer of release is my reminder that I literally will physically, sit with my hands like this and do a prayer of release where it's saying, Lord, I have chosen to step into a place of, whatever it is, something that's frustrating or where there's injustice or brokenness or trauma. And I'm feeling the impact of that brokenness and really the result of sin right now. And then really taking a moment to just say, I'm releasing it to you. I give it to you, Jesus, because it's too much for me to bear. You say your yoke is easy and your burden is light. And this burden is too heavy for me. I need to give it to you. So I take a moment to do that first. And then the prayer of listening is really, it's a concept that I take from in 2 Kings, where the king Hezekiah, he had this overwhelming force of the Assyrian army coming against him. And he was really, from a human perspective, it was hopeless. Yeah. And what it says Hezekiah did is that he took this letter, this threatening letter he had received from the king of Assyria, and it says that he spread it out before the Lord. And then what he does is he simply prays a prayer that is reminding God of who God is and his promises, and then simply saying the situation. And he doesn't even ask for something very specific. It's laying the situation out before the Lord. Like, here it is, Lord. Now what are you going to do? And so for me, I go from a prayer of release like this, and then I spread my hands out further and I say, I'm laying the situation out before you, Lord. And now I'm taking time to sit here and listen and hear what you're saying to me about it, whether that's simply let go, Emily, I have this, or if there's something that he is calling me to do. Is it something he's calling me to do? And in the story of Hezekiah, the prophet Hezekiah has spread it out before the Lord, and then the prophet Isaiah comes to him with an answer. And so that's a practice I do, is that release and then that time of listening. And it's short. This is nothing. Again, we have busy schedules and busy days. So oftentimes I'm doing this for 30 seconds and then 1 minute. I'm listening, Lord, what are you saying? Yeah.
And sometimes we don't get that answer right away.
Right.
But you're open. You're open to listening and hearing. Yes. And I think that that's so important, is that we open ourselves up to receive. Because if you shut that off and continuously hold it. So that's wonderful. And so for those of you that are out there listening, this may be something that you want to put in practice for yourself also, because I think that's wonderful. Listening and releasing. So releasing and listening in that order. And I really like that thing of, sitting there and just breathing, because we've talked about that a lot on this podcast, doing that meditation and being attentive to your breathing in and out. And then that click sound. Okay, it's time to release. And that, when we unbuckle our seatbelts, that's a release also. It's
true. Yeah. And I would say when I'm in that listening posture, oftentimes it's not even that the Lord is giving me an answer of something to do. Sometimes most often I would say I'm listening and I'm hearing the Lord giving me a promise, such as be still and know I am God, something that I can repeat, or stand still and see the deliverance of the Lord.
Yeah. But that's really good. And I'm glad to know that you have those practices in place, because most of the situations that we deal with alongside family or almost always people that are in a stressful mode, or in I needed like this help like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the other organization that you were with, the Family Preservation, and how you struck out and started alongside family. So tell us a little bit about that, and how you went about, because this was huge. This was
It
a
was.
huge realignment of your life to be able to start this nonprofit. And so share with our audience a little bit about that, because there are people probably out there listening that want to do something and are kind of frozen.
Mm. So for me and for our partner churches and other leadership with alongside families at the time in 2021, it became clear that for the sake of how to best serve local families, how to best serve our partner churches, how to be able to have local management of funds and local governance, that the best option for continuing with our ministry was going to be to become a locally headquartered nonprofit organization. And the reality is, Vivian, that as we were looking through, as I was speaking with multiple of our partner church pastors around options and what the Lord was saying, I actually had in my mind that becoming our own nonprofit organization was the one thing I would not do. Because I thought, there's other options. Let's come under the umbrella of another nonprofit organization, see if we can become a program of another nonprofit locally, or multiple other options we were looking at. And I remember telling one of our partner church pastors, well, and there is the option we could become our own nonprofit organization, but that's the one we probably won't do because I'm not convinced we have the capacity to do it. And this pastor looked at me and he said, Emily, I believe that that's the one option the Lord does have for you, because it's the one where his strength is going to have to show up the most. It's going to be like Gideon's army. And I didn't want to hear that right then. I'll tell you that, because I was convinced it was the one we wouldn't do. But as we explored our options and as I took counsel with others and prayed about it, it really became clear that was going to be the way that we could best serve families who are in crisis locally and best serve our partner churches that we work through. And so with that, it was a process where I suddenly was having to research and explore and make connections for something that I had never had in mind to do. And we also had to do it just because of partnerships agreements and other things like that. We had to do it pretty rapidly, where we only had a couple of months to set up a new nonprofit organization. And so it was a lot. It was a journey for sure.
Wow. That is interesting. And that is such a testament and such a testimony of how God can operate through us when we are open and we're willing to hear from him. And just like you said, the very thing that we don't want to do because we don't feel that we have the skill set for it, that's what he likes.
Right.
That's what he really likes. Because then now nobody can get the credit but God himself. We certainly can. So you had to do this pretty rapidly to get this all set up and going. And so at the time, how many partner churches did you have supporting you?
At the time, we had 6 formal partner churches, and then we had multiple volunteers from about 15 additional churches who came under the umbrella of those partner churches. And so we had these 6 partner churches who we had 100% backing from those pastors, prayer support, as well as tangible support, which was very key to what we were doing for sure.
Wow. So now here you are, the COO, executive director, founder of this nonprofit organization. So and now you're having to kind of switch gears a little bit, even though in the other organization you were the director here locally also. So now you've had to have staff, and you got to have all of these people supporting you. You got to write all of these job descriptions and programs and all of these things. So what is your leadership style? How would you describe that leadership style?
I think one of the biggest things that is important to me in leadership is collaboration. I am very much a collaborator. I like to bring various strengths to the table and see what each person has to share. I don't think that anybody has all the answers and all of the know-how to do things. And I would say that collaboration sort of value was one of the things that was most helpful as we were trying to set up Alongside Families and get it going, because I was able to tap into a network I have of executive directors of other family preservation, nonprofit organizations in other states who we were able to work together to form policies, to get resources in place, and do far more than I ever could have done alone. So that collaboration really was key to us even being able to set up Alongside Families successfully.
Well, those are two very important C words that I've heard you use tonight. Was the one you just used, collaboration, and the other was counsel. That you got counsel from others as you were venturing out. And I think that those two things are very important as we are realigning our lives, because even though we may be hearing from the Lord, sometimes it's good to have that rubber stamp. Now we need to be listening for ourselves, but if you're bringing along godly counsel alongside you, that's always, you'll know that, and they are hearing from God also, then you know that you're on the right path. And so, interesting enough, when I came on board here, there were two 15-hour people.
Yes.
And you and one other person were full-time, and here you are pregnant, and so going out pretty soon. So it's such. How does that work with having that skeletal staff and to be able to get done all that you do?
Well, first and foremost, it comes down to the right people. At Alongside Families, it has always been very key to me that we are being really prayerful and very prayerful, cautious, and wise as we are seeking to hire team members, that even if we are urgently in need of filling a position, that we do not rush to fill a position, that we're taking the time to first see, is someone a fit with the culture and value system of Alongside Families first, and then do they also have the skill set to match the need? Because if someone comes in and has the skill set but doesn't match our values, the culture of how we do things, how we treat one another, it's not going to work. And so we are blessed at Alongside Families to have a beautiful team of powerful women who have one another's backs and who we can count on one another, that if someone has a lot on their plate, someone else is willing to step in and help, and there's no backbiting or putting down. It's women who are there to lift one another up and make one another look good. And honestly, that's what makes me look good. It's the only reason Alongside Families looks good is because we have that team.
Well, I tell you what, you are a worker bee. You really are. And you really, and that's the one thing that you want to find in a leader, and especially in, an organization of this size, is that the leader is willing to get in there and get in the trenches with the other people, with the rest of the staff, And I do find that you do that. So and because of the burden of what we're doing in family preservation and I would say, the tender lives that are at stake that we are working with, what kind of support system do you have in place for yourself? You talked about earlier how you have the exercises that you do. But just as this organization talks about, supporting,
right,
having that support, what is your support system?
So first, I have to shout out to my husband. You mentioned my wonderful husband, Lars. He truly is the only reason I'm even able to do this ministry. Lars, when we were very first looking at, way back in 2016, launching this ministry, really said, Emily, we can go forward on one salary for a time. Why don't you quit your job and volunteer full time, because God's put this burden on our heart. And so, this organization, initially, I was able to launch it 100% volunteer with no paid staff for 2 years because of Lars. And he is my number one supporter and encourager, and the person who points me back consistently to why I'm doing what I'm doing, the vision that the Lord gave us. So he is a huge support system. And I believe that if you're in this type of ministry work, you better not do it if you don't have a spouse who is 100% behind it as well. So that first and foremost. And then I have a very supportive family system overall, and a couple of close friends who I'm able to lean on for that emotional support. And then I would say professionally, I mentioned this group of other executive directors that I connect with, and we are very close knit to the extent where it's almost daily that one or the other of us is texting the other with a need for prayer, or saying, I have a situation I'm dealing with. Can I get feedback? This is what I'm thinking of doing. And it really is an incredible both professional support network, but these women are also all believers who are in the family preservation space, and they know the spiritual warfare and the challenges that come with this ministry. And so they are, I would say, my primary professional support system, and also those who are able to give the most solid feedback as to what's going on, especially when there's a challenging situation.
That's great. So, Emily, share with our listening audience how I know what to say and how to do, but I want them to hear it from you. Mm-hmm. How do you get involved alongside families, and why would you tell a church or an individual it is worthwhile for them to be involved in this ministry?
Well, first, I would speak to a church, because alongside families, we really partner with churches rather than individual Christians. And then we're asking those partner churches to call out their people and for them to recruit volunteers to serve. And so to the church, I would say that I just believe so deeply that I love the church. I love the body of Christ. And I believe so deeply that this ministry of loving our neighbors through the Great Commandment and the Great Commission was given to the church. And that over the years, the local church has really given up a lot of ground of areas where we have said, you know what, we need professional services, or we need the government to intervene here, versus recognizing that the church was the one who was given a mandate to love our neighbors. And that really, if we were doing that well, there would be far fewer families that would get to the point where the government did need to intervene with them. And so, first and foremost, it is a mandate to the church. And then secondly, I believe that the church needs this ministry as much as the families that we serve need it, that we really were built to, like Jesus did when he was here on this earth, to go deep in relationship with others, and to that ministry was never intended to simply be, while these are all good things, we were never intended to only do one-off ministry things, perhaps serving in a soup kitchen or doing a backpack drive, that the Lord calls us to build deep relationships with others, and that really is what leads to an eternal impact and even to salvation for a person. And so I just believe that this is something that any church can do, and that it seems intimidating, and I won't sugarcoat it. It is a hard ministry. It's very challenging, but I believe it's something any church can do because the Lord equips what he calls his church to. And if he called us to love our neighbors and to love families like he does, and he will equip the church to care for families in this way. And it is hard, but it is deeply rewarding to be called into those hard places and have to see how the Lord's going to show up in it.
Well, and I'm glad to hear you say that any church can do it, because there may be that question of we're just a small church, we don't have that large of a membership, so I don't know if we can do it.
And I would encourage too, I know that you have viewers or listeners, not only in Charlotte, North Carolina, but across the country, that there are opportunities. I mentioned this collaborative. I'm part of the Upstream Collaborative, and there are crisis child hosting ministries like this that are gospel-centered, that are focused on family preservation across the United States. And so it is something that there may be another ministry like this near your listeners, even if not here in North Carolina.
Yes. And we also have a ministry located in Asheville, North Carolina, alongside families. So how has this overall realignment of your life really, how do you see it? What would you say to someone that is kind of on the cusp of, I don't know, I'm not sure, I've got a passion, and I know that this is a continuing thing. I think that life is a journey, and so you've had several things that happened in your life on this journey that could have, you could have backpedaled, but said, I give up. So what keeps you motivated, and what would you say to someone?
Well, you asked earlier about my sort of leadership values. I had said collaboration. Another big one for me is purpose. You could call it purpose, or what is the foundation of this? What was the purpose? And for me, it is so important to go back constantly to, why am I doing what I'm doing? What did the Lord call me to? And when the Lord places a calling on your life, oftentimes it's not the whole calling. You don't see the whole calling yet. He calls us, I believe he calls us to what we're willing to step into a little at a time. I always sort of laugh about it, that if I knew what I was getting myself into back in 2015, 2016, when I was saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to do this, I probably would not have had the courage to do it. And I believe that was the grace of God to give me enough vision and calling and purpose to take that step. And then he led me along another step and another step. And so I share this pretty frequently at our volunteer trainings, that if you're like me, when the Lord places a calling on your life, it is, my first response was, this is too big for me and I am not equipped. And I have learned as I've gone forward that is precisely the right place to be in when the Lord places a calling on your life, because the Lord was able to respond to me. That's exactly the point, Emily, that it's not too big for me. It's not too big for God. And I do the equipping when I call. And so I would just encourage you that it's a good place to be to feel ill-equipped. And then with that, you also can recognize that you are equipped. You have everything you need because the Lord already laid the foundation up to that point in your life to prepare you for that step. And that's what like I shared earlier about these very disconnected jobs and positions I had in social work, where now through Alongside Families, really it's kind of encompasses all of the areas that the families we're serving are struggling in, that the Lord allowed me to dip my toe in each of them to have a broader picture. And so I would just encourage that, yes, you are not equipped without Him, that it has to be the Lord doing the work, and you want to be in that posture of humility. And then secondly, also have a posture of boldness to know the Lord called me to this, and so He's already equipped me at least for this step. So just take that next little step and He'll open up the purpose and the calling as you go forward.
One step at a time. And I'm reminded, as you talk, I'm reminded of the scripture, your gifts will make room for you and put you before great men. And so if that's what God says, that's what He'll do. And that's the final word. So Emily, you shared with our listening audience here very beautifully. And thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for what you're doing, and that you had the boldness to walk out and to step into this, because there are so many families that are still out there that need this service. And so would you share with our listeners how people can people can become involved with the ministry, how they, if they need the service, how can they apply for the service, or how can they get to the service?
Sure. So, and I think you might be able to put links. Am I correct that you can put a link here that I say? But I would encourage people they can simply go to our website, alongsidefamilies.org. And that it's both very easy to reach out for support on there. We really, it's not something you need a referral for. It's simply reach out for help if you need it there. And as well, there are lots of opportunities to plug in. We are always looking for more partner churches. We are always looking for people to join our prayer team. That is the foundation of our ministry. We are always looking for individuals who want to say, I could partner with $20 a month as a monthly donor to fuel this work of gospel-centered family preservation. Or I'm wanting to host a child in my own home, and I'd like to explore how I can get my church involved so I can do that. There's a lot of need. And one thing that's on my heart right now, I have been praying that verse that says, ask the Lord of the harvest to send workers out into His field. And that's what we're in need of.
Yes. Well, I want to just thank you so much for sharing your heart and sharing your journey of realignment. And I know that this isn't the end of the story. And for those of you that are out there listening, if this is something that has moved your heart, that you can contact us at, you want to share the contact again, Emily?
Yes, it's www.alongsidefamilies.org.
Okay. So if you go to that website, you can get plugged in. And most of all, we want to get your church plugged in with us. So again, thank you so much for being with us this evening, Emily, for this episode. And for those of you that are listening, if you found a lot of information that is helpful for you, please make sure that you share this podcast with others and have them to come on board with us also. So again, thank you. I always enjoy having guests with us on this podcast. We would love for you to leave your comments or your reviews. And if you want to get in touch with Emily or anyone with Alongside Families, once again, you can go to the website, alonesidefamilies.org. Emily, if there is someone that is wanting to call in to our support line, is there a number that they can do that?
Yes. So the support line number, whether you are calling and needing support in Charlotte, North Carolina, or in Asheville, North Carolina, is 704-900-0150.
Great. Repeat that one more time,
Yes.
because there are seniors out there like me that are a little bit slower.
704-900-0150.
Great. So thank you again for listening in. And until the next time, I leave you with peace. I hope you enjoyed this episode. The best gift that you could give me is to share this podcast with family and friends. And don't forget to review it. That way, this podcast will grow organically. If you need to reach out to me, please check out my Facebook page, DM me there, or you can email me at godskow@gmail.com. We have upcoming Bible studies that we would love for you to join us in, or if there is a guest or someone that you would like to see me interview on this podcast, please let me know. We are here to work together to realign our lives. Until the next episode, take care, and I look forward to sharing more and more with you as we realign our lives. Peace until next week.